ahead and speak.
1, 2.
Yeah.
There we go. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Raise your hand if you have not seen me speak before. So everybody knows how this works. We'll be taking questions and learning together. I want to echo what Jim just said, that this is something, and I've been saying this now for a year and a half, that as realtors, you do not need to hire anyone else to help your clients figure out what to do. You can do this. Let me just get situated here. You can do this yourselves, and you should do this yourselves. I had a consultation yesterday with a client who he had 2 properties, and he was trying to do short sales on it. He gave a lawyer $2,500 each for each of the 2 properties, $5,000, and the attorneys did absolutely nothing. We're not, when people are asking us, do you have someone to refer us to do loan modifications or short sales or what have you, what I'm suggesting is for short sales, go to your realtor. And I think that if you are inclined to do this, if you're in a position to do this, you can do this. This is not difficult. What Jim said is absolutely correct. What I'm going to do is go through a list of different things. Is it going up there? Setting appropriate expectations. Oh, I like how you did this. This is great. Okay. The first thing you have to do if you're representing a seller or a buyer in a short sale is set appropriate expectations. If a person in a normal circumstance comes to you and says, I'd like you to sell my house, can you list my house for sale for me? And they have equity in the house and their house is here in the South Bay, what would your answer be? Sure. Of course. This is exactly what you do. When someone who is upside down, who owes more on the property than it's worth, comes to you and says, can you sell my property? What is your answer? It's not of course. It's I can try, and I can't guarantee it. Now this is a very unnatural position for you to be in as sales professionals because you want to be able to set the enthusiasm. But what we're finding is that the realtors who are getting in trouble on short sales are the ones who start out by not setting appropriate expectations. They treat this as if it's a normal sale, and it isn't. This is a very different thing than the thing that you ordinarily do. So to the seller, you need to say, well, we're going to need everything we need in an ordinary sale. We're going to need a buyer who wants the house, who has the credit, who can get the loan, who has the down payment that's necessary. But we need another thing. We need your lender to be willing to take a haircut and take less than they are owed on the property. That's a whole other feature of this. And you explain to the sellers that lenders are different on Wednesday than they were on Tuesday, and they're certainly different in November than they were in July or than they will be next March. And that we don't know, we're dependent upon getting a lender to agree to do this. And if they don't agree to do this, they may foreclose on the property. Now, you don't have to upset the seller to the point where they don't hire you, but you need to tell them that no one can promise what the lender is going to do. This sounds simple, but it's getting missed, and what we're finding are claims are being made against realtors, against agents and brokers by people who say, look, I relied on my realtor who didn't get the job done. I lost my house in foreclosure, so I think I've been damaged and I've got a claim. So setting expectations for the seller is going to be critical. The second thing in setting expectations, ooh, good, yeah. Okay, all right, I'll buy that. The second thing in setting expectations is talking to the buyers. You have an entirely different arrangement with a buyer in this transaction. The story that you just heard is an excellent story, and you have hiccups and problems and turmoil in these transactions that you don't have elsewhere. It's important that the buyer understand that they are doing something different when they're buying a short sale or an REO or a foreclosure. It's a different animal, and there are a number of different reasons why it would be. Let's go to the next one. What happens, I got a demand letter a few weeks ago from a lawyer. Now wait till you hear this. From a lawyer who says, I am the attorney for the buyer, you're the attorney for the selling agent. My client bought a house, your client, the agent, told us it was a short sale, and so my client, the buyer, bought it as a short sale and closed escrow. but we think you committed fraud. We think your client committed fraud by representing it as a short sale, because after the close of escrow, my client, the buyer, went out and studied the market and found out that they had paid the same for this property as they would have if it had been a normal sale. So you committed fraud. So this lawyer, whose IQ was hovering right around room temperature, centigrade, thought that a short sale meant a discount. But then I started thinking about it, and when you think about it, when you get a call from a client who's a potential buyer who says, I want to buy a foreclosure or an REO or a short sale, what are they really expecting?
A discount.
They're looking for a deal. And that's great, and they should get a deal. What you need to explain to them is, I assume that the reason that you'd like to buy a short sale is because you're going to get a better price on it. Let's make sure you do. Let's make certain that you do, because there are a number of different risks as buyers that you have when you're a buyer in a short sale, or for that matter of an REO or a property that's in foreclosure, than you do in other circumstances. Let's see what some of those issues might be. Okay. The first thing to remember when you're talking to the buyer is the seller is broke. And so there's going to have been, in all probability, deferred maintenance. This is something where the seller, who's running out of money, has probably neglected things at some level. Not always, but very frequently. They didn't quite get the kitchen fully remodeled. They kind of got part way. They let the eaves fall apart. They didn't. There are going to be problems with the property, so you need to take the right of inspection very seriously. Next, the seller is broke. And as a consequence, they don't have all that much motivation to disclose. You have to remember that the seller, who is in a short sale situation, didn't expect to be there. This isn't why they bought the property. And so they're not going to be looking at it and thinking in an enthusiastic way. They may be depressed, they may be anxious, they may have other financial problems. And you can't count on them to be motivated to really go out and really think carefully for you, because they're broke. Next thing to remember is the seller is broke. And as a consequence, if it turns out that the buyer buys this property and experiences disappointment and then discovers it was because there were inadequate disclosures, that the result is they may bring a lawsuit against the seller, but because the seller is broke, the seller may not have any money to respond. Who does that leave to sue?
You.
So you need to, as you're speaking to the buyer, you need to tell them that the seller is probably broke and it probably wouldn't have money to respond to in a judgment. Now, these are all reasons these are not reasons not to buy a short sale property. These are reasons to make sure you're actually getting a discount on the short sale property, and that you're actually getting paid for the risk. Your buyer is actually getting paid for the risk. The next thing to remember, let's all say it together. The seller is broke. And as a consequence, what we're seeing is they frequently become squatters after the close of escrow. More frequently than you'd imagine. Sellers are discovering that after they've gotten the debt forgiveness and they've gotten out and the escrow's closed, they don't have any place to move and are staying until they're evicted. So we're seeing some of that rise. So you need to make certain that you see indicators that the seller is moving when you get close to the close of escrow. You need to make sure that that the buyer isn't just sitting in the moving van outside the house with no place to live. If you're going to be able to maybe get the property vacated a little before the escrow closes, that would be good. If you can prepare your buyers for this eventuality, that would be good. If it turns out that the seller doesn't move out promptly, you need to send your clients, your buyers, to an eviction service. It's the cheapest way to go. If it's going to be a really ugly thing for some reason, then you may need to refer them to a private attorney. But ordinarily, you can go to the eviction services. The Apartment House Association magazine has plenty of lawyers that will do evictions for $100, $200. They're cheap.